If you're standing on floorboards that have seen over 150 years of history, you have a choice to make. You can renovate, conveniently covering it over with something waterproof and contemporary, like today's pre-manufactured flooring. Or you can restore, which is about the soul. It's about reclaiming the ancient timber and patching holes, finishing to highlight every character-giving scratch and stain, and preserving its legacy. It's not about making the floor look new. It's about making it look alive again. This is the floor in a room of a farmhouse that was hand-built in 1864. The previous owners wanted to flip the house, so they covered most of the other floors with cheap manufactured flooring. What a pity! Fortunately, they never got around to this room. It had several coats of paint on it, which I ground off using a high-speed grinder with a 30-grit sanding disc, exposing damaged wood, beautiful wormholes, and a lot of gaps. In this video, you will see firsthand how I preserved this old floor, making it into a useful, cleanable floor that will be marveled at for decades to come.
This pine floor is about 170 years old, and it had several layers of paint on it, and I've removed the paint, and now we have these big gaps in the flooring. So the wood filler for 64 ounces. I'm probably going to need about 3 times that much, so that would be like $100.
I knew there had to be a cheaper alternative, something I could make an unlimited supply of myself.
Get a gallon tight bond, $24. The key is to have a very fine consistent sawdust. So what I did is I put a 80 grit flap disc on this grinder, and then I set up a bag to catch the sawdust. You might already have sawdust collected, but the key is to have the same consistency of sawdust, the same grit, not with little flecks and little pieces in it, but to have some nice fine sawdust to work with. Obviously, sawdust is going to land everywhere, so you can just gather all that up too. It's quite a bit that just lands on the table. See, this is 80 grit fine sawdust. It's a good start. So this is aliphatic resin glue, namely Type-On glue, mixed half and half with some warm water, and then just shaken up in the bottle. We'll just pour it over the sawdust. And mix it to a pasty consistency. It'll mix very easily. And that sawdust is going to absorb a lot of this, so you can see the consistency. It's kind of pasty. So I like to clean out the cracks. I use a grout removal tool. This easily cleans out the cracks, and you can see how much debris you find in there. It's dirt and hair and everything from hundreds of years. It's amazing the amount of dirt you find in these floors. Decades of debris. Some big gaps here. Take my little sawdust paste and you can see how this stuff is just going to go right into the cracks. Get your little cracks. I'm using just a regular putty knife, flexible. Got a big gap to fill here. That's a big one. You can imagine how much of the store-bought stuff it would take to fill this up, and it would end up being quite expensive. For these deep cracks, there's a lot of rot in there. I'm going to supplement it with some wood shavings. Just to fill some of the voids.
In order to fill the large holes, I chose to add some pieces of wood to reduce the shrinking of the paste. This would also add rigidity and durability to the gap.
Press it down in. And we have a big hole like this to fill. Now you can cut a piece of wood and put it in there, or you can just simply fill it with shavings and the compound. So what I'm just going to do it the easy way. Might even work to start off with some good old glue, just to get a bonding surface. Just a little glue in there. Give it something to stick to. Fill it with shavings. Just make sure it's all pressed in there good, I guess. Let's make sure we press it down in there.
I knew that the drying time might take longer than conventional filler.
As I expected, there was quite a bit of shrinking in some of these big gaps. The small ones, very tight, rock solid. Once it dries all the way, it takes a long time to dry. You can sand it just like that. Of course, there's some voids in there. But if you want a floor that's not going to collect any dirt, lightly just scrape off the bumps with a scraper instead of sanding it and getting dust everywhere. Vacuum it off. And just put a really quick coat right over the top. This evens it all out. Can go into a container. Save it for the next time.
Once all the cracks and voids were filled and completely dry, it was time to tackle the excess material. I used an 80 grit disc on a 7-inch high-speed grinder, which was the same tool I had used to strip off the old layers of paint. High-speed grinders are very aggressive, so I had to be careful and use a light touch, but I felt confident I could do a clean job. To handle the massive clouds of dust, I opened the windows and set up a powerful fan to pull the dust straight across the room and out the other side. This setup worked perfectly. For the final sanding, I switched to an orbital sander with 120 grit discs. This easily removed the swirl marks left by the grinder and created a smooth surface ready for the finish.
So all together for this room, I used 1, 2, 3, 4 singing discs, 7-inch flat disc, and for my orbital sander, 3 pads.
Getting rid of every bit of dust before sealing the wood is crucial. After a thorough vacuuming, I wiped down the entire floor with a cloth dipped in thinner to pick up the remaining fine powder. Using a brush, I started by cutting in the finish around the perimeter of the room. In any kind of finishing job, the final stage of applying the varnish is the quickest and easiest part. It's the preparation that takes most of the time and effort.
By the way, this is the finish I'm using. It's a water-based finish, and I was wondering how it would change the color of the wood. Well, it does a little bit on this pine as it soaks in, and I was expecting it to be lighter. And of course, wherever that filler was put on the wood, it's going to show up if it wasn't sanded off. So I expected that.
Then, I poured a line of finish directly onto the wood and rolled it out evenly and generously with a paint roller. The next day, I just had to dust the floor before applying the second coat.
Taking my roller, spray it out. And I'm going to roll until I don't see any lines, until it's spread evenly. I don't see any puddles or lines. So here we have the finished product. I just love the rusticness of the floor and all the flaws, all the inconsistencies, all the bumps and curves and unevenness. Just the wormholes, the places where it's rotted. Back in the corner where there was so much water damage and beetle damage. The big parts that needed to be filled in. Is it flat? No. Is it shiny as glass? No. Does it have little bumps and particles in the finish? Yes. But this is a 140-year-old floor. And just to maintain the rusticness of it, this is what we wanted. This is exactly what we wanted.
Looking at the result was incredibly rewarding. I felt a deep sense of pride in bringing that old floor back to life. Not only was it functional, but it was something to marvel at and study it as one would look at a piece of art.